The story I'm going to tell you now happened to a former boyfriend of mine. He had a strong ability to sense the supernatural, and he had a reputation amongst his friends for seeing ghosts when they were together as well. One day, he visited a building known to be haunted with some of his bike buddies. This alone was a mistake, but it was a hospital in the mountains a short distance out of town that was no longer in use. That building was already pretty well known amongst us friends as an extremely creepy place. And it wasn't really the place you wanted to go in or out of. For 3 of them to go there alone, they must have been out of their minds. But it seemed they went there to have a bit of fun. There were no problems when they arrived. Inside was pitch black and they couldn't see a thing. They were there to have a little fun, so none of them brought a torch either. In the end, all they had with them was a 100 yen lighter, and then they went inside. And inside the hospital, the place was falling apart and covered in mold, as it hadn't been used for many, many years. There was a 20-meter or so wide hall right in front of them, and they could see what appeared to be several hospital rooms. Apparently the doors were locked and they couldn't go in. At any rate, they checked each room one by one as they proceeded down the hall. Then, they found one door alone that was unlocked. That was the only room on the entire floor they could enter. Curious, they went inside. Inside, they found a brand new bed, nursing wheelchair, and so on. It looked like somebody was still using the room, even now. But looking at the hospital from the outside, there was no way that could be possible. Although he thought it odd, he still went inside the room without hesitation. Then he saw an old dresser and white box by the window that were covered in a white cloth. Finding it strange, he lifted the white box and shook it. It seemed something was inside. It was a little heavy, and the contents rustled. When he opened it, there was a bundle of black threads inside. Looking closer, it looked like a woman's ponytail that had been cut off. Huh? It won't light. It won't light anymore. Hey, quit playing around. The door! Hey, idiot! Don't run away! After that, he asked his friend to show him the lighter, but the lighter he had just bought was already out of fuel. Like it had melted away to nothing. The 3 of them fumbled in the darkness and somehow made their way back to the exit. Even after that, they were still panicking. At that point, they called it a day. My ex arrived back home at 4 a.m. He opened the door and went into the living room, and there, his older sister was watching a video. Apparently, her sixth sense was incredibly strong as well. The moment she saw him, she jumped in surprise, and then immediately looked down. Ah, the soccer goal collection. I wanted to watch that too. When you're done with it, let me watch it next. But she didn't hear him. She just looked at the ground and trembled. Taking his eyes off the TV, he finally noticed how his sister was acting. What's wrong? Why aren't you talking? Was your hair always that long? Eh? It was true he had long hair, but it wasn't long enough to surprise his sister like that. He was apparently surprised as well. "Your hair reaches your backside. Where on earth did you go, and what on earth did you do there?" "What do you mean?" "You've brought something back with you. A woman with long hair. She's calm right now, but be careful." "Yeah, okay." After that, he waited patiently and calmly for the ghost to disappear. Apparently, it left his room after about 3 hours. A few days later, he and his friends were talking about doing a test of courage, and so they decided to head to that hospital again. This time, around 20 of them would be going, with torches, of course. When they arrived at the hospital in the mountains, they split into groups of roughly 3 and went into the building group by group. It was like a proper test of courage. They were speechless with surprise. With 20 or so people there, everyone acted differently. Some went in slowly, others sang in loud voices, and some took pictures. With the atmosphere being this bright, my ex figured everything would be okay and ignored his sister's warning. And for a short while, nothing happened. Of course, with 20 people around, it's not exactly going to feel very scary, is it? Apparently things proceeded smoothly and without incident. And perhaps thanks to that mood, one of the people in his same group took a camera out of his pocket and took a photo of the two of them. He probably didn't think much more of it than, "I hope we capture a ghost in this photo somehow." "Who was that? Who's trying to scare us?" "It's gotta be someone from one of the other groups. They always get so easily carried away, ha ha ha." Meanwhile, the group that had gone ahead of them was in the medicine room or something, and they could hear the faint sound of glass breaking. Hey, am I the only one who hears glass breaking? Yeah, it's got to be the guys on the first floor. Jeez, they're going a bit overboard. Medicine bottles were falling off the shelf one after the other, and the various pieces were dancing in the air as well. As the group watched what was happening, they couldn't bear it any longer and rushed down the stairs. My ex's group on the first floor also noticed what was going on and rushed over. It happened not long after the group on the second floor joined those on the first. There was no time to brag about the strange sight they'd all just seen, and they fled outside. My ex waited by the entrance to make sure nobody was left in the hospital. Of course, he was the last to leave, but not a single person waited for him. His friends had gone on ahead, gotten on their nearby bikes, and then left without him. As a chill ran down his spine, my ex put the hospital behind him. At the time, my ex rode a 50cc scooter. Of course, it couldn't go very fast. As he left the hospital by himself, he rode down the mountain at 70 kilometers per hour. Then, as he approached the first curve, he found his friend's bike. His friend had a 250cc bike, so it wasn't exactly slow. But it seemed he was worried about him, and so he waited. Relieved, he was grateful to his friend. Then he rode with his friend for about another 5 kilometers. His friend, who up until that point had ridden rather slowly to stay by his side, suddenly sped off. "10 minutes later, everyone gathered at the usual meeting spot. Curious about what had just happened, my ex asked his friend about it. He said that suddenly the seat behind him grew heavy. It was like someone had jumped onto the bike behind him. When he checked the mirror, he could see a woman with long hair, and she was staring at him with a fearsome expression on her face. My ex thought he was just lying and looked at his rear seat. That part of the bike alone was wet. A few days later, he got the photos that were taken that night. Looking at them, an anger he feared might drive him mad washed over him. I saw the photos as well, but there were 2 in particular that were rather strange. The first showed numerous handprints on one of the hospital walls. The second was a white line cutting from his friend's neck to his shoulder, and another that cut over my ex's left leg. Several days later, that same friend suffered a terrible wound going from his neck to his shoulder thanks to a bike accident. And my ex also badly injured his left ankle when he fell while riding through the mountains. After that, he did his best not to participate in any more tests of courage. I think it's best if we all stay away from such suspicious-looking places. If you absolutely have to go, then you should take great care. And don't forget your torch. Since long ago, Kyoto has been a land contested by those seeking power, and much blood has been shed on it. Perhaps for that reason, Kyoto is full of mystery spots. This story is about when Miyazaki Tadao went to high school there. Tadao's friends were part of the judo and kendo clubs. They were all strong athletes, and Tadao himself was also the captain of the karate club. Whenever they got together throughout the year, things were always a racket, and throughout their high school careers, they feared nothing and no one. During the winter of their 3rd year, however, something happened. One day, one of Tadao's friends showed up at school looking like absolute crap. Tadao was terribly worried, and so he went with a friend to talk to him. "What's wrong? You haven't looked so good recently. You look like a walking corpse today." Sorry for worrying you," his friend said, his voice listless. "If there's something bothering you, then you can talk to us." Apparently, his friend was thinking of moving. It was a strange story, wanting to move during the winter of their final year of high school. His friend didn't really want to say why, but after they pestered him, he finally spoke. "Well, you see, my place is haunted." "What do you mean, haunted?" "Well, like, it's a little difficult to say, but there's a ghost." "A ghost?" Quit screwing around, you idiot. Everyone burst out laughing. To them, ghosts meant very little. But still, he was acting so strange that everyone decided to go to his house to exterminate the ghost. That night, Tadao and other friends, confident in their abilities, gathered at the friend's house. About 3 hours passed. So where's this ghost? I haven't seen it at all. No, you'll see it soon. You know when it appears. Yeah. Then, footsteps started coming up the stairs. Ton, ton, ton. It's here! What? That sound is it? Yeah. Ton, ton, ton. Ton, ton, ton. Ton, ton, ton. They heard the footsteps again. They seemed to be coming up one step at a time. At that point, everyone froze on the spot to listen to the footsteps. Ton, 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 ton. The footsteps truly were coming up the stairs one step at a time. Alright, they're gonna reach the sliding doors in just a second. Someone jump out and see who it is. Alright, I'll go. Once the footsteps reach the door, someone open it for me. One of the guys from the kendo club readied himself. Ton 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 ton. The guy from the judo club thrust his upper body in the hole towards the stairs like he was about to fall out. What? There's nothing. He was in the midst of saying when he turned to look the other way. Just as he was about to scream, he passed out on the spot. Everyone dragged him back into the room. He remained unconscious for a while. Everyone wanted to ask him what happened right away, so they splashed some water on him. Suddenly, the prone kendo player sat up. They immediately asked him what happened. Well, I didn't see anything near the stairs, but when I turned to look the other way, I saw some legs. And? What of it? They were wearing straw sandals, which I thought was odd, but as I looked up... As you looked up? I saw armor covering the back of the hand and then body armor as I looked even higher. A headless warrior from the Sengoku period was bringing a sword down on me. At that, he passed out and didn't remember anything after that. Seeing their friend go pale, even these tough guys felt themselves freeze with fear. Then everyone approached the owner of the house, who had been watching the entire scene take place with calm eyes. So that's the ghost you were talking of. Yeah, but not just that. When we're having dinner, they ride around the table swinging their sword, just like something out of the Sengoku period. Numerous people have seen dozens of spirits of warriors on horses riding around Shijo-dori in Kyoto. Kyoto really is a strange place. My sixth sense has always been incredibly strong, ever since I was a child, and these days I'm even able to see people's guardian spirits. But that's not exactly very useful in my day-to-day life. What is useful is being able to understand the type of person someone really is deep inside, faster than other people can. This story I'm about to tell you is about the scariest experience I've ever had. When I want to see someone's guardian spirit, first I have to lightly grip their hands, and then we both have to focus. If anything gets in the way of that, then I won't be able to see them. Then, before long, I'll be able to see the shape of their guardian spirit behind their shoulders and head. Sometimes I meet people who don't have a guardian spirit though. Like, if I try to see yours but I can't see one at all, then I probably won't tell you the truth. It feels a little sad, right? So anyway, I have a boyfriend. I really wanted to see his guardian spirit, and although he didn't really believe in that stuff, I was able to eventually convince him. Then I went to his house for the first time. We lightly held hands, I focused, and my mind went blank. As I was concentrating, I opened my eyes and stared at the spot above his head. Then, I was able to vaguely see what appeared to be a warrior in armor from the Sengoku period over his left shoulder. This warrior looked both brave and kind. No doubt my boyfriend also possessed both a strong and kind heart, just like this warrior did. Next, a large glittering pearl appeared above his head. It was a deep red, like the turning leaves in autumn. I didn't know exactly what it was, but it seemed to be governing his future. That's about all I could say about it. Finally, I saw an old man who appeared to be around 80 or so. He appeared to be kind and gentle, and his eyes were closed as he faced us the whole time. Eh? What the? The old man by my boyfriend's right shoulder gradually opened his eyes large and looked right at me. He was looking at me. He was looking at me the whole time. Usually I was the one looking at them. But I had no doubt that he could see me as well. I quickly let go of my boyfriend's hands. I lost control of myself. I fell into a daze, and my eyes refused to focus. I could hear my boyfriend's voice, but I was so frightened that before long, I started crying. I had never been so scared before in all my life. Curious, my boyfriend asked me exactly what I'd seen. I explained what they looked like to the best of my ability. Then he looked at me with an expression of surprise on his face and muttered, "That last one, that's my grandpa." He grabbed a photo album from the shelf and showed it to me. He was right. The third guardian angel I saw was his grandfather. According to my boyfriend, his grandfather doted on him all the time. So most of the photos featured the two of them together. Apparently, he was a lively old man who always used to say that he would live until he was 100. But 5 years earlier, he had a stroke and passed away. Maybe he really wanted to know what his grandson's girlfriend was like. Or maybe he was protecting his grandson from any spiritual harm I may have caused him. Either way, we've both been living together happily since then. I'm sure his grandfather approves of our relationship. That's what I believe. But ever since then, I've stopped trying to see other people's guardian angels. I don't want to experience anything scary like that ever again. Report. The most representative ghost story about tunnels has to be from this one, Kotsubo Tunnel. Like numerous hands reaching out of the walls to attack the car, or spotting the ghost of a woman nearby. There are no other tunnels where people have experienced so many of these things than here. Hoshida-kun, a high school student who liked surfing, was one of these people. One summer night, he was riding home from his girlfriend's house. He was about to reach Kotsubo Tunnel, approaching from Shonan. By the tunnel's entrance, he saw an old woman in a white kimono just standing there. A ghost, he thought, and pedaled as hard as he could while trying not to look. But shortly after he entered the tunnel, he saw that old woman standing inside again, about halfway in. Uah! He pedaled desperately past her. When the exit finally came into view, again he saw the old woman standing there. This time, he closed his eyes as he pedaled, but then... bang! The seat behind him suddenly grew heavy. Something's behind me! He tried to shake it off. The bike zigzagged, and he slammed on the brakes. It seemed to have worked. The pedals felt lighter and returned to normal. I did it! Relieved, he turned to look to the side and... that old woman with messy white hair was glaring spitefully at him. She was running right next to his bike. After that, he didn't remember how he got home. Are strange experiences like this so common, perhaps, because there is a graveyard on top of the tunnel? The riddle has yet to be solved. Access. By car, take Highway 134 from Kamakura towards Zushi, and on the way, you'll see a sign for Zushi Tunnel. By foot, a 20-minute walk from JR Zushi Station. Point. Fear, 4 flames. Atmosphere, 3. Sightings, 5. Chance of being cursed, 3. Total, 4 flames. Apparently, locals never stop their car inside the tunnel. Report. This spot is rather famous locally for traffic jams and accidents. Accidents have always happened easily here, and so they are quite frequent. Cars gather from Chigasaki, Enoshima, Ofune, and Yokohama, so there is quite a bit of traffic. The terrain also turns into a sudden curve and a downhill slope, so that's probably why there are lots of accidents as well. Shimada-san always passed this intersection on his way home from work. One night, he was driving home like usual when, suddenly, the bloody face of a man appeared on his windscreen. He panicked and quickly turned the steering wheel. The car spun and then stopped once it hit the traffic lights. Luckily, Shimada-san was uninjured, but he claimed he really did see a bloody face. Numerous people have actually died at this intersection, and the flowers there never end. Because of these accidents of unknown cause and people who don't remember why they happened to begin with, there are some who say that a spiritual force may be at work influencing matters. Could it be that those who have died at the intersection are stuck there even in the afterlife? Access. By car, 1 kilometer from the lights in Teppojuku heading towards Enoshima on Prefectural Highway 30. Point. Fear, 2 flames. Atmosphere, 1. Sightings, 4. Chance of being cursed, 2. Total, 2 flames. The intersection is rather busy, even on holidays, so there are apparently people who hate using it for that reason as well. This happened in a dream. It was perhaps being manipulated by some strange power. Or perhaps it was reality born of the subconscious mind. Perhaps prophetic dreams that predict the future are a power lurking within us that isn't yet understood. A housewife by the name of Tayoko started seeing these prophetic dreams 2 years ago. The first prophetic dream she had involved a boy by the name of Akira-kun, who lived in the same dorms as her, hitting his head and being carried away in an ambulance. In the dream, she was standing in the kitchen. The next moment, she was in a heavily populated place with lots of food items around. She was standing there with her own child. Oh my, it was Akira-kun. Is he okay? This must be hard on you as well, she said to her son's friend Akira-kun and his mother. Then the dream ended. Then, 2 days later, as she was standing in the kitchen, she heard the sound of ambulance sirens. At the time, she had completely forgotten about her dream. Then, the next day, she ran into her son's friend Akira-kun and his mother as she was heading out to the supermarket. Akira-kun had a bandage around his head. Seeing him like that, Tayoko remembered the ambulance from the day before. Oh my, it was Akira-kun. Is he okay? This must be hard on you as well. She said the same thing she said in the dream. The heavily populated place full of food items from her dream was this supermarket. The sensation of dreams and reality intertwining shocked her. Although it was only fragmentary, Tayoko had seen the accident in a dream only 2 days prior. This incident was the first time she'd ever heard about prophetic dreams. About 6 months later, she had another strange dream. This time, she was walking through her husband's workplace. For some reason, there was a large, seemingly endless window on the ceiling. Yet she walked without a care in the world. Then suddenly the window opened and something fell down. It was a man's head. Tayoko forgot to even scream and ran. She felt like something even more horrifying was going to fall next. As she ran around trying to escape, 3 parts of a human body fell one after another from above her. Swept away by fear, she ran all the way home. With great difficulty, she finally arrived home and next, she heard her husband's car starting. After what had just happened, Tayoko instinctively felt that if her husband went to work, then he would die. This must be a prophetic dream. I'm seeing my husband's death, "Dear, you mustn't go. Please, you mustn't go to work." She didn't know if she was still in the dream or back in the real world, but she strongly felt that she couldn't let this continue either way. Of course, all of this was happening in Tayoko's dream, but this intense dream left a deep mark on her heart. For the next 2 days, Tayoko prayed for her husband's safety. On the afternoon of the second day, her husband returned home like he always did. "Oh, thank God, you're safe." The fact her husband was home meant that her prophetic dream was wrong. That previous dream with Akira-kun had to be nothing more than a mere coincidence. But what her husband said next betrayed those thoughts. His face pale, he told her that a terrible accident had taken place at work. One of his colleagues got caught in the elevator for construction equipment and tragically died. He got sandwiched right in front of her husband's eyes. His body was torn into 3, and then he fell from 3 meters in the air. "That's enough!" Tayoko screamed before she could stop herself. Then she sat down on the floor, trembling terribly. Seeing his wife acting so strange, her husband was at a loss for words. "So, it was a prophetic dream." She repeated the words over and over, zero emotion on her face. And so, after the reality of her dream that came true 2 days later, she started to have these same prophetic dreams every single month. Recently, she had a dream of her own death. Who knows whether it came true or not? Even if they tried to find out, there is nobody who knows of her current whereabouts. Hey, that sounds fun. Let's try it. With light feelings, that was how it all began. It was supposed to be just a game. Michio, Chika, Akemi and I were especially fond of scary stories and the supernatural. One day, we found a supernatural game in a magazine and decided to give it a try. The game was simple and involved 4 people, one standing in each corner of a dark room. Then they would follow the walls one by one to walk to the other corner. They would tap the shoulder of the person standing in the next corner and then stop. This continued until the last person reached the corner where the first person started. Normally, there wouldn't be anyone there. But there was a chance a mysterious 5th person might be there, who would tap the last person on the shoulder. Excited, we decided to start the game after midnight. Well, it's after 12. Yeah. Shall we begin? At the time, everyone believed the game was honestly fake. I did too. We didn't really believe it. Michio especially, so she stood in the final corner, and then Akemi, myself, and Chika took our spots in turn. I'm gonna turn the lights off now. I stood in the second corner. "Kayo, here I go," Akemi said to me and started walking. "Akemi's coming. There's no way a ghost will appear right at the start, right?" For a moment, all I could hear were footsteps in the darkness. Then I could vaguely see a figure as the footsteps got louder. It seemed there were legs. "Oh, thank God. I was worried you might not be there. Kayo, you're wearing all black so I can't see anything." I was relieved.
明美、カヨ、騒いでないで早くしてよ。
私は別にいいけどさ。
Chika and Michio are scared. Chika, here I come. I made noise on purpose as I walked to try to scare them. Chika! Come on! You took way too long. Be careful! All right, Michio, here I come. Chika started walking towards the fourth corner. I remained in the third corner and sighed in relief that nothing happened. The reason I chose the second corner was that, supposing a fifth person appeared, I would be on the opposite side of that corner and wouldn't suffer any harm. Michio, you have my deepest sympathies. Huh? Don't say such weird things. I'm not scared, you know. Michio started walking towards the first corner, where Akemi had been. The three of us listened closely, muttering inside as we watched Michio about how nobody would be there. Hey, don't all fall quiet at once. There's not going to be anyone there. You're all scaredy cats. We held our breath. We couldn't see anything in the darkness. But it felt like the mysterious fifth person waiting in that corner was going to tap her on the shoulder. Stop that, Michio. It's you, right? Quit fooling around. Hey, say something. Akemi? Was that you? What happened to Michio? Akemi didn't answer. Michio! Akemi! Turn the lights on, quickly! They're right behind you! In this strange atmosphere, Chika and I screamed before we could stop ourselves. I thought we had to end the game immediately. I was starting to feel scared. But no matter how long we waited, Akemi didn't answer. Unable to wait any longer, I ran over to Akemi to turn the lights on myself. The switch should be somewhere around here. I heard footsteps coming from behind me. They were getting closer. I searched desperately for the light switch. Light returned to the room. Michio, whose shoulder had been tapped by the mysterious fifth person, lay unconscious on the floor. Akemi, who had screamed, lay next to her. Michio, are you okay? Michio! It's no good, Chika. They're both passed out. We need to leave them be. What on earth happened? I don't know, but something most certainly did happen. They are the only two who know. Yeah, In the end, the game left us with a bad aftertaste. What on earth was that fifth person? We had no answer for that. The school toilets. They're at their most scary when you have to go alone after school. They're a mysterious spot, well known for numerous scary stories and urban legends. Old rumours often change name and shape as they're whispered around the country. One of the most famous ones is of calling Hanako-san's name before a toilet door. Sometimes you might get a reply. And also, if you're in the toilet, sometimes you might hear a knock from the outside. Do you want a red cape? Do you want a blue cape? You'll be asked. If you answer red cape, then your head will be cut off, coating the area in red as you die. If you answer blue cape, all the blood will be drained from your body and you'll die bright blue. Even now, students fear the red cape, blue cape. And in these school toilets, this scary rumour exists as well. Let's go into the last stall. Somebody's knocking on the door. But something's not right. There were no footsteps. To knock on the last stall door with no footsteps. What would you do? Open the door. Nobody's there. Even though the knocks were so persistent. That's simply too strange. Was somebody there and then they ran away? Or was something not of this world knocking on the door? I'll leave that up to you to decide. I'm a junior high second grader who lives in Yamato Kodiyama City in Nara Prefecture. This is a terrifying experience I had during the autumn of 3 years ago. Looking back on it now, seeing and hearing ghosts and supernatural sounds would probably have been much better. At any rate, please listen to this strange story that intruded on my normal daily life. On the day of our opening ceremony at school, we didn't have any classes and we finished by lunchtime. There was an autumn festival that happened to be taking place at the same time at the park near school. I decided to check it out with my friend, Kazue-chan. She said she wanted to go after watching a show on daytime TV. Alright, I'll meet you at my grandfather's house at 1:35. Okay, bye-bye. Both my parents worked, so I always spent days at my grandfather's house. After lunch, I watched the show that Kazue-chan said she wanted to see. Yeah? I heard Kazue's voice coming from the front door. She was here even though the show hadn't ended yet. That's strange, I thought, and I stuck my head out into the hall leading to the door. And sure enough, Kazue-chan was standing there. She stood frozen by the door with her hair out, something she rarely did. You're early? You want to go already? Yeah. I was curious, but I figured that maybe she just dressed up for the festival, so I didn't dwell on it too much. Alright, Grandma, I'm heading out now. Okay, take care. I called out to my grandmother in the sitting room and then left. Sorry to keep you waiting. Kazue-chan wasn't there. I thought maybe she was playing a joke and hiding nearby. Kazue-chan, come on. I couldn't find her no matter where I looked. Worried, I went to a nearby public phone and called her house. Hello, this is Nakao. Is Kazue-chan there? Eh? She's sleeping? I was confused. Apparently, she'd been at home all that time. Kazue-chan's house wasn't that far from my grandfather's, but it certainly wasn't close enough that she could return home in the few minutes it took me to call. Plus, it would be a bit odd for her to show her face at my place and then go back home to sleep. Still, she most definitely did call out to me. Who on earth was it that came to my house? Maybe it was actually Kazue-chan's living spirit. Before I begin this story, there's a name I'd like you all to remember. Kawarazaki. I'll repeat it. It's Kawarazaki. It might sound strange, but please keep it in mind. Just make sure you remember it. Okay, let's begin. This is a famous story where I'm from that happened when I was a high school student. At the time, there was a motorbike gang who rampaged throughout 4 different areas. The leader had a violent temper and was an egotistical man who none of his subordinates dared defy. He loved motorbikes, and he especially loved taking dangerous curves on them. There's nobody on this planet who can take corners faster or cleaner than me. Can you take a 90-degree corner at 180 kilometers per hour? There isn't a single person who could do that. Other than me, of course. He was so confident in his skills that he could laugh off challenges like that. But then, one night, 20 to 30 bikes drove along the coast like a snake, as they always did. They were like a glowing sea snake. After riding for about 10 kilometers along the coast, there was a curve where accidents often occurred, which was their goal for the night. Only 2 more kilometers! Leader, I don't think we should today. After all... I can't hear you. They could see a gentle curve that cut across to the left up ahead. The bike in the lead picked up speed and they took it as a group. Then, suddenly, the lead bike lost control. It hit the ground and started to slide off course. Leader! The bike went over the guardrail and unluckily fell down the cliff and exploded. Not a single trace of it was left. Of course, the rider died instantly. It's such a gentle curve, so why? Everyone thought. The gang was too large to break up, and having just lost their leader, they installed their number 2 as the new leader instead. But 1 week later, the new leader died a strange death. And then the next one, and then the next one. Whoever stood at the top died every single time. Before long, it wasn't just the leader, but also his subordinates who suffered. And every single death was strange and out of the ordinary. A chest of drawers fell on a member while he was asleep, rupturing his organs. A member fell down the stairs during the night, injuring his head. But the most common cause of death was mysterious suffocation. All of these incidents happened while the members were asleep, and it was strange when they were found dead the next morning, so there were fears that a serial murderer was on the prowl, but they later determined that they all must have taken their own lives. I know one of the members who was able to escape those terrifying incidents. According to him, he suffered sleep paralysis during the night, and their first leader appeared before him with a strange question. "Whose fault is it that I died?" "Whose fault? Was it you?" It was at this point that finally he could move his mouth. "It was my fault." "I see, so it was you. All right." No doubt those who had died had all experienced the same thing up until that point. Then, the next morning, those who took responsibility for it died. So then, how was he able to escape death? "No, it was Kawarazaki's fault." That was how he answered. Then a pained expression appeared on the leader's face. "I see. So it was my fault. All right," he said, and then got back on his favorite bike and disappeared by that curve. But it's not like he was able to peacefully pass on. He was a selfish man, so he looks for people who will answer his question and appears before them. So far, he hasn't just appeared before the members of that bike gang, but also people who hear his story as well. Within the week, he'll find your address and appear at your house. So, I'll leave it up to you what you do after this. The hint is the name I told you at the start of this story. As long as you say that, you'll be fine. If you succeed, you'll never see him again. I'll pray for you from the bottom of my heart. Goodbye. If you ever run into something you can't put into words, something that you can't believe actually exists in this world, what on earth would you do? The woman in this story has her own interpretation of the strange event that happened. But whether she's right or not, we don't know. This strange happening occurred to Mutsumi when she returned to her family home one day. It was a big old house, and the guest room was particularly large as well, coming in at nearly 20 tatami mats. As she walked through the front door, she saw her mother sitting in the Japanese-style living room. "You must be tired. Why don't you get changed into something more comfortable?" "Okay, I will." At the time, Mutsumi thought something was different with her usually lively mother. Her face seemed kind of pale. Maybe she caught a cold or something, she thought. "Mum, did you catch a cold? You don't look so good." "Mutsumi, you don't need to worry about me. Her mother smiled at her, although her voice lacked power. "Well, if you say so." Mutsumi was worried, but her mother's smile was somewhat relieving. Then she opened the sliding door to the next room to put her stuff away. Her older brother then poked his face out from behind the sliding doors. "Mutsumi, you can use the guest room." "Ah, thanks." As she walked down the long hall, breathing in the nostalgic scent of wood, she thought about her mother. She couldn't stop thinking about her pale complexion. Once she reached the end of the hall, she slid open the door to the guest room. It was just as she remembered, massive and open. She turned the lights on. What on earth is that? There was something large and round in the middle of the room that almost reached the ceiling. She hadn't expected to see such a thing right before her eyes, and she was unable to even mutter a gasp. She stared at the thing from where she stood stock still. What is that? It was a horrifying sight she couldn't even imagine. What she saw was a large, flesh-coloured ball that appeared to be made up of melted faces, limbs, and body parts writhing in pain. "Brother, come quick!" Almost falling over in shock, she called out to her brother working in the garden. "What's wrong, Mutsumi?" "What is this?" "What are you talking about? I don't see anything." "You don't see that?" "Yeah, I don't see anything. I see you're still as strange as ever." And then Mutsumi wasn't able to see anything either. She felt oddly unsettled. Mutsumi had long been able to see ghosts, so she figured what she had just seen was supernatural. And considering that, and her mother's condition, she sensed something was soon going to happen in that house. "Brother, I fear something bad is going to happen here soon. Do you have any idea what?" "What on earth are you talking about? Everything's fine." "Yeah, but Mother doesn't look so good." "You've got your own family now. You don't need to worry about us. Leave it all up to me." Her brother answered her like nothing was wrong at all. But after that, she learned that her older brother had actually been embezzling the family's assets. That strange thing she saw that day was all the spirits that had attached themselves to her brother. At present, her brother is now missing and has cut off relations with their parents. I think that it's pretty normal for nobody to be left at school after 6:30 p.m. At my school, there's never anybody there at that time. But this happened several years ago. There was a student from the swimming club who returned to school after 6:30 because they forgot something. They should have just picked it up the next day. This student was walking down the road past the station when they realised they'd forgotten something. It was 6:32 p.m. They rushed back to school. But the front gate was already tightly locked. Left with no other choice, the student went around to the rear and entered through the emergency exit. The atmosphere felt completely different to how it was during the day, and it was dark and creepy. The student ran down the hall towards their classroom. They bounded up the stairs 2 at a time. Proceeding to the 2nd floor, they then turned the corner on the long 3rd floor hall and stopped, seeing a familiar sight before them. Out of breath, they approached their classroom and realized the lights in there were on. Was somebody in the classroom? The student went inside. Looking around, they spotted a girl sitting in a seat by the window. Perhaps she was from a higher grade because they didn't recognize her, but the student called out to her anyway. The girl was sitting in the seat behind the windows and staring at something outside. The student wondered what she was doing at this time, finding it all a little strange. But the student was more concerned with what they had forgotten. So they ignored the girl and went to their own desk. They heard the sound of a desk moving behind them. Curious, the student turned around and the girl who was looking outside was now looking at them. Looking closer, that girl had been severed at the hips, and only the upper half of her torso was floating in the chair. Blood dripped to the floor. That most definitely wasn't normal, the student thought, and in a panic, fled the room without the item they had come back for. As they ran as fast as they could down the hall, the student prayed desperately that it was all just a dream. But it wasn't a dream, nor even a hallucination. You see, the girl continued to chase after them. She gradually closed the distance, and it was only a matter of time until she caught up. The student desperately ran down the hall, then flew down the stairs 5 or 6 steps at a time. Then, after they had run about 200 meters or so, they looked back. That girl with only the upper half of her torso had caught up. If their hair had just been 5 centimeters shorter, they would have escaped. The girl grabbed their hair and started pulling. The student grabbed a nearby railing and desperately held on. They couldn't cry for help. Even when they tried, the girl was pulling down on their hair, forcing their jaw into the air and making them unable to speak. It wouldn't be long until they could no longer breathe. "Help me!" As their consciousness started to fade, they summoned up all their strength to faintly spit those words out, no doubt conscious of their impending death. Hey! What's wrong? Hey, come on now! The student opened their eyes when they heard the security guard's loud voice. It seemed they had passed out. The guard was on patrol, and, hearing odd footsteps, he apparently followed them the whole time. "What on earth are you doing here at this time?" "I forgot something. I came to get it, and there was a girl with no legs." "A girl with no legs? There's nobody here but you." No way." They looked around, and the student and the guard really were the only 2 people there. In the end, the guard saved that student, although it seemed the guard didn't feel that way at all. What on earth was that girl? Judging from that student's story alone, she must have been a ghost, but it's still unclear. But apparently, if you go to school long after it's ended, then you will undoubtedly run into her, and there have been numerous victims of her since. Report. The first thing they found in the trash can at Inokashira Park was a man's severed ankle. After that, they found various body parts cut into 1 to 5 centimeter pieces, such as his arms, thighs, shoulders, and insides. They found 24 parts in plastic bags in 7 different trash cans across the park. The identity of the man was discovered to be Kei-san, a first-class architect who lived nearby. Why did Kei-san, such a serious and warm personality, suffer such a cruel fate? As of 1995, this incident still hasn't been solved. Inokashira Park is filled during the day with families and is a popular date spot at night. Yet, there was a horrific murder at this peaceful, popular park. How very unfitting. If we think about how the victim Kei-san likely played with his children at this very park, it's beyond sad. Kei-san's hatred and rage against those who committed such a sudden, horrific act against him must still linger in this park. Access. On foot, a 3-minute walk from JR Kichijoji Station. Point. Fear, 2 flames. Atmosphere, 4. Sightings, 2. Chance of being cursed, 2. Total, 3 flames. Recently, a witness came forward claiming to have seen the incident. I pray it will be solved soon. Our family moved to a new house in Chiba in July 1975. It was bigger than our previous house and had a yard too. I was never prouder of my father than I was then. I was beyond happy that my 10-year-old self at the time had a room all of my own. Although it was a new house, it wasn't newly built, and so we got it second-hand for a great price. My father was a regular businessman, so even that great price was kind of pushing it. "Hey, Ritsuko, please move your own stuff," my father said, so I grabbed the cardboard box to the side and carried it into the house. My room was on the 2nd floor, and I struggled to get my stuff up the stairs. The stairs were at the end of the dim hall that extended from the entrance. Despite the fact it was early summer, the hall was rather chilly, and as I looked up at from the bottom of the stairs, I suddenly dropped the box I was holding. "There's a boy here." I could see a boy around 5 years old sitting at the top of the stairs. He wasn't looking anywhere in particular. He was just sitting there. He didn't seem to have noticed me down below. I thought one of the local kids must have snuck inside, and so I ran to get my father. "Dad, look! There's a boy up there!" But when he came over, the boy was gone. He checked the 2nd floor just in case, but the boy was nowhere to be seen. My father smiled. "You're just imagining things," he said, not taking what I said seriously. That child often appeared on the stairs after that, however. And that was just the start of the strange things that often happened in this house. Looking back on it now, even if my father had taken me seriously, it wouldn't have mattered. 1 week passed. It was late at night. It was a muggy night, so it was difficult to sleep, and I heard a strange sound as I slept lightly. I could clearly hear the breathing of some animal approaching my room. Afraid, I tried to sit up, but then I noticed something strange. Eh? I can't move! No matter how much I tried, I couldn't move even a tiny bit. And then, as I struggled to move my hands and feet, something suddenly jumped on top of me. I quickly realized it was the animal whose breathing I could hear. It seemed to be on all fours and was balancing on top of me. It was so heavy that I struggled to breathe, but even though I tried to scream for help, no voice came out. When I next opened my eyes, it was morning. I must have passed out just like that. The next strange happening took place a month later. It must have happened about 2 hours after I got into bed. It felt like the air around me suddenly got colder, and as I slowly opened my eyes, I searched my room for the presence I felt. I realized someone was by my feet. When I tried to roll over, I was shocked. No way! I can't move again! Just like last time, I couldn't move at all. My nerves were frayed. The figure at my feet got closer. They slowly walked towards me with tiny steps, and then sat down on my hips. The sensation was so light that it felt like it had to be a child of only 2 or 3 years. For a while, the child sat there, fidgeting. Then, they disappeared after about 5 minutes. I was so scared that I wasn't able to go back to sleep. And so, this kid that sat on me was probably 2 or 3 years old. I told my parents about what happened at breakfast the next morning. Ritsuko, you often had bad dreams when you were a child. How long are you going to keep dawdling for? Hurry up and get ready or you'll be late. My mother said it was just a dream, and my father thought I was just half asleep. My father especially seemed to think I was just nitpicking the house. To be honest, ever since coming to this house, my life changed. But my parents didn't understand me, and I was the only one to experience these strange events. I went to school, but I was unable to focus in class, and all day all I could think about was that strange experience. At the time, I didn't yet understand what ghosts were. I must be imagining things. Yeah, that's it. On the way home from school, I tried to forcibly change how I felt about things. I'm home. Huh? That boy I'd seen sitting on the stairs that day we moved in was by the front door. I wasn't imagining it. He's right there. I ran to my room and buried my face in my pillow to cry for a while. Ritsuko, dinner's ready. My mother came up to the second floor. I told my mother everything that had been happening in full seriousness and told her we should move out of this house right away. But instead, she got angry and left my room. Left alone, I realized something felt wrong again.
ここにいるよ。
I had no idea what it all meant. But suddenly, I saw something strange and heard voices echoing in my head. It was like someone was looking for someone else. That was all I felt. When I came back to, I was lying on the ground in my room. Strange things like that continued to happen once in a while after that. But I couldn't talk to anyone about it, so I just did my best to put up with it. Then one night, I was sitting at my desk studying. Suddenly, I sensed someone standing behind me, so I turned around. A girl around my age was standing on the other side of the window. Her hair was braided, and she stared at me with blank eyes. Like I said before, my room was on the second floor. And of course, there was nowhere for anyone to stand out there. But by that point, I was no longer surprised. I'd gotten used to this sort of thing. I called out to the girl. "Who are you?" She looked at me for a while with a surprised expression on her face, but finally, she disappeared into the darkness. That girl with sad eyes was wearing white clothes, and I clearly remember they were covered in mud. A boy around 5 years old. A girl around 2 or 3 years old. A girl around 12 years old. And the animals on 4 legs. They continued to appear and then disappear before me, over and over, appearing and then disappearing. Several years passed and I turned 14. I made new friends, and my closest at the time was Masako-chan. We often went to hang out at each other's houses. One day, I stopped by her house on the way home from school. Her grandmother also lived with her, and she always gave us homemade sweets when I went over. "Ritsuko-chan, whereabouts do you live?" In the residential area on the hill past the river," I said, and then she told me a story from 20 years ago that happened near where my house was. I discovered an unexpected truth. The summer of 1959. There was an incident where some children from the area went missing in the mountains. The adults got together to look for them, but they couldn't find the children anywhere. In the end, they chalked it up to a spiriting away, and the search was cancelled. It was 3 siblings who came from Tokyo to play that had gone missing. The parents were so distraught that everyone who saw them cried as well. "Hang on, Grandma. Do you remember anything specific about those children?" She gave a deep nod and then slowly started speaking. The eldest was a 13-year-old girl with braids, wearing a white dress. Then there was a 5-year-old boy with a white shirt and shorts with a bowl cut. The youngest was a 3-year-old girl whose legs were so weak that she often sat down after taking just a few steps. "It's them," I muttered to myself, but the old woman kept going. Even after the search was called off, their father refused to give up. He apparently climbed the mountain every now and then and killed wild dogs. But those dogs were left in a horrid state from the rifle and bayonet he took with him. I didn't know why I was seeing those children and wild dogs, but they had no doubt been waiting a long time for someone to find them. They really must have been waiting a long time, right? I couldn't help but feel that way. I built a small altar for them on one side of our yard and prayed for them. Did my feelings reach them? I never saw them again after that. My heart hurts even now when I think about them. When I was in elementary school, I was saved numerous times by some invisible power. Let me tell you about one of those times. It was when I was 7, so in the 2nd grade, I think. I went to play at my best friend's house at the time, Yasuo-kun. We lived in the municipal apartment complex. I was in Building 9, and he was in Building 22. What happened was so shocking that I still clearly remember it. From Building 9 to Building 22 was about 300 meters in a straight line, I think. No matter what way you took, it wasn't that far, and I was used to it, so I kinda spaced out as I walked over. Then, after I'd been walking for more than 10 minutes, I realized something. Wait, this is the same road as before? No matter how much I walked, the scenery didn't change. It was unbelievable. But before long, I had an idea. What would happen if I turned back? But I struggled to turn around. I was filled with worry. I mean, if I turned around and it was still the same scenery, that would be horrifying. But I thought that it wouldn't be any different to constantly walking this way and seeing the same thing, so I summoned up all my courage and then turned around. Everything looked the same. But then I saw one thing alone that was different. What the hell is that? Somewhere in the distance, it most definitely looked like a person. But the figure was black from head to toe, so I couldn't tell their age nor their gender. No, I couldn't even tell whether it was actually a person or not. Was I afraid? No, I think the feeling of worry about the unknown was stronger than fear. It felt like I'd be dragged to another world if I looked at them for too long, so I turned around and continued going the other way. Ahead was the road I knew well. I ran as fast as I could, because I was worried that the scenery would still be the same again. But contrary to my fear, next thing I knew, I reached Building 22, where Yasuo-kun lived. When I finally felt like I could calm down, I started to grow strangely curious about that black figure. Nervously, I turned around. Oh, it's not there. The black figure was gone. It was as though my experience was an illusion that existed in plain sight. But then, the real strange experience happened when I turned back around to face Building 22. What I saw in front of me was Building 9, my apartment building. That's right, it wasn't Building 22, the building that should have been in front of me at that moment, but instead Building 9, the building I had originally departed from. The tears I'd been holding back finally poured forth, and when I told my mother about what happened, it was through sobs. That night I was so unbelievably terrified, so I cried with my head under the blankets. It wasn't until the next day that I learnt that an old woman who lived alone in Building 22 had jumped from it and died. Maybe it was a coincidence, but if I had been able to reach Building 22 that day with no problems, would I have encountered that old woman hitting the ground in front of me? At the very least, I might have gotten involved somehow in her death. That was how closely the times matched up. At the time, I felt more afraid of what could have been, rather than feeling like I'd been saved. What on earth was that black figure? Even now, I still don't know. At the time, I met with a powerful spirit medium and told them what happened, but they said that it was definitely not my guardian angel. So what really was it then? Sometimes I've wondered if maybe it was a Shinigami, but in the end, I can't help but think that black figure actually saved my life. I haven't experienced anything supernatural like that since, and my life is completely normal. But even now, I still have a habit of turning around when I pass someone dressed completely in black, which is a bit annoying. The first time I experienced this was 2 years ago, on August 29th. It started around 10 p.m. as I was listening to a tape on my cassette player. As I was listening, I started to feel sleepy, so I turned the lights off and lay down. The player would turn off automatically once the tape was done, so I left it on as I lay in bed. Once I checked that the tape had stopped, I looked at the time. It was 10 p.m. I was finally ready to sleep. I closed my eyes and turned over. I was almost asleep when... Is that an earthquake? My bedroom shaking made me open my eyes. I'd never experienced an earthquake before, so I tried to get up to happily tell Mum about it. Eh? My body refused to move. It seemed I was frozen on the spot. It was the first time I'd experienced anything like this before. I had always wanted to experience something scary at least once, so I was actually happy, not afraid. I let things be. But no matter how long I waited, my body still refused to move. Suddenly, I heard a strange sound coming from the cassette player. I thought maybe it was the radio, but it should have been turned off. The strange sound started to disappear, and then next, I heard a sound coming from the front door. I tried desperately to scream to my mother for help. I couldn't even move my mouth. Unable to do anything, my heart started to pound in fear over this new experience. Before long, things calmed down and returned to normal in my room. Thinking I might finally be able to move again, I summoned my strength. But it was no use. All I could do was wait until it passed. And then, in the darkness, I saw a white silhouette suddenly appear. Was it being projected directly into my brain? My eyes were closed, but I could clearly see a cat. It was a large cat, probably around 1 meter tall, and covered in blood. At that moment, I remembered the name Mi-chan. Mi-chan was a cat I picked up about a year earlier. I found her abandoned in the field behind my grandmother's house, so we took her in and made her our pet. Mi-chan gave birth to kittens 3 times a year. But we were unable to find owners for them, so in the end, we looked after them as well. But because of that, we were unable to look after Mi-chan herself. We just couldn't keep any more kittens. I was against it, but my parents were firm. The next May, they took Mi-chan to the next town over and left her there. That day, I cried and cried. I was so racked with guilt that I thought my heart might tear apart. Perhaps she had died somewhere and had come back to haunt me. Namu Amida Butsu, Namu Amida Butsu. I chanted and prayed with all my heart. Please, please go away. I repeated the chant a few more times, and then, with a quick chill, the cat disappeared. The paralysis gripping my body also disappeared, like I'd never been frozen to begin with. I turned to look at the door and couldn't help but feel like Mi-chan had just walked out. It was so strange. I looked at the clock, and it was 10:15 p.m. It felt like I'd been frozen on the bed for ages, but only 15 minutes had passed. In a daze, I got up to go to the toilet. On the way back, I patted one of Mi-chan's kittens. My younger brother was in the tea room. Hey, did somebody come over before? No. What about Mum? She's in bed. Really? You felt that earthquake just now, right? What earthquake? Is your head okay? I was the only person who felt that earthquake and heard those sounds. Maybe that paralysis was foreshadowing something. Was that cat really Mi-chan? Did she have an accident and had come to tell me that she died? Did she hate us? Or maybe she came to warn us that one of her grandchildren, born in August of that same year, was going to be attacked by a stray cat. October of this year. My mother saw a cat that looked just like Mi-chan in an empty lot in the next town over. Apparently when she called out, "Mi-chan," that cat meowed and came closer. But she refused to get too close, so she couldn't confirm whether it really was her or not. I hope that really was Mi-chan. But if it was, then who or what was that cat I saw? It's so strange. Report. Over 60 people have jumped from this bridge, which stands 150 meters above the ground below. It's often covered in fog, and apparently even the locals won't pass it at night. Because of all the people who have died there, you can often find flowers offered to them. It's a bridge shrouded in a heavy atmosphere. Okada-kun, a university student, enjoyed riding his motorcycle here and there. It was one summer night. He was riding through the mountains when he approached this bridge. The bike's engine, which had been fine up until that point, started making a strange sound and then stopped. I don't like the looks of this place. He got off his bike and then, when he looked at the engine, above the bridge, he saw something like a white cloth fluttering around. It was mostly translucent, like a jellyfish, but it looked like a woman with long hair. And she was floating in the night sky. Okada-kun was so surprised that he froze on the spot, dumbfounded. And then, half-translucent white figures floated up, one after the other, from beneath the bridge. They all seemed to join together above the bridge, spinning around and around in the air. Uah! Okada-kun desperately started his bike. He sped off at full speed, running from that strange sight. Was that the spirits of those who had died at the Rainbow Bridge? That image was in complete contrast to its name. Did the Rainbow Bridge invite people to end their lives and join the world of the dead? Access. Car from Chuo Expressway, Sagamiko Higashi, to National Highway 4112, then Prefectural Road 513 to Prefectural Road 64. Point. Fear 5 flames. Atmosphere 5. Sightings 5. Chance of being cursed 3. Total 5 flames. This bridge is also where the terrible mother and child insurance murders incident happened. This happened 5 years ago, when I was in the first grade of high school. It was a strange day where classes suddenly ended during the morning, despite the fact it was a weekday. This seldom happened. But it seemed something terrible had happened for the first time since the school was founded, so all the students were sent home. I didn't care anything about that, however, and I was just happy to go home early. I rode my bike home feeling overjoyed. As I was waiting by the traffic lights on the main street, I noticed that something was different to usual. There was a strange tower amongst the usual stores and buildings. I rode this way every day, and I'd never seen it before. I was curious as to what it was. At first, I just thought it looked interesting. I rode towards that tower, which was in the opposite direction of my house. However, I had no sense of direction, so I was a little worried about finding my way around somewhere I'd never been before. Still, as long as I rode towards the tower, then I should undoubtedly reach it. Curiosity drove me forward, and I pedaled even faster. But no matter how much I rode, I didn't get any closer to the tower. On the contrary, I actually lost sight of it. And, on top of that, when I looked around, I had no idea where I was. I slowly rode around looking for the tower. Where did that tower go? Huh? Once again, I found something strange. It was a street that looked terribly out of place compared to the rest of the scenery. And this street had a gate that was far too extravagant to be just for a shopping street. Chinese letters were carved into the entrance of the gate, but I was unable to read them, perhaps because they were too old. I went through the gate. Immediately, I experienced something very close to regret. What I saw before me was just that shocking. What I saw was not even the city I knew, but, to put it more boldly, it wasn't even the Japan that I knew. And strangely, it should have only been around 2 p.m, but it was dim, like the sun was setting. All the houses had their shutters closed, and not a single person was walking around. I walked down the street leading from the gate as I pushed my bike. Then I heard a woman singing somewhere nearby. It was a sad, nostalgic voice that I felt like I'd heard somewhere before. Next thing I knew, tears were forming in my eyes. As I pushed my bike towards that voice drawing me in, I passed by a store that seemed to deal in kimono fabrics. I looked inside. A woman who appeared to be floating in white sat there holding a child. I realized something was a little off. That song she was singing just didn't sound like a lullaby at all. Maybe that was just me. I'd never heard a lullaby that sad before. Finding it strange, I stood there for a moment. And then, perhaps the woman noticed me because she turned around and looked in my direction. The moment our eyes met, a chill ran through my body. I couldn't stand there any longer. Everything got more and more confusing, and I left my bike there and ran as fast as I could. Next thing I knew, I was nearly home. I told my family and friends at school about what happened, but there were no towers in that area, and nobody had heard of anything like that, so nobody believed me. For sure, I often looked on my way home from school after that, but I never saw that tower anywhere. And in reality, no such tower exists in this town. As time passes, I've started to think that maybe I was dreaming. But there are some facts that make me feel like I wasn't. And that's the bike that I was never able to find, no matter where I looked for it. Is that bike still in that town where we shared that experience together, even now? It's so strange. This happened the first summer after I started work. It was my first job after graduating from high school, so things were pretty hectic. But still, things were going pretty good for me. I was using a train line that had just been completed to get to work, so there were few passengers, and it was actually quite peaceful. One day, I had some rare overtime, so I was late going home. I got on the train at my usual platform, but unluckily for me, there wasn't a single available seat. I clucked my tongue in disappointment and grabbed the hand grip, staring at the darkness outside the window, while thinking about nothing at all. 3 or 4 stops before the one I got off at, I saw something flit past the window. At first, I thought it was a vinyl bag floating on the wind. But thinking about it, there was no wind that day, and I realized it was incredibly hot. That's weird, I thought, and I looked at the white object again. Despite how fast the train was moving, the object was keeping up with it perfectly. It was like it entranced me, and I couldn't look away. I think 2 or 3 minutes passed. Then, suddenly, it slowly turned, as though it was looking my way. Even now, I still remember the shock I felt. And the reason for that was because the white object outside was actually a woman in a white kimono, covered in blood. I stared in amazement, unable to look away for some reason. I watched the woman for a while, but it sure was strange. The people next to me were totally calm. Did that mean I was the only person who could see her? I'm the only one who can see her. A chill ran through me. An uneasiness gripped me. But then, I realized that I'd seen that woman I was looking at before. Ah! Nagata-san? She was my classmate in high school. Nagata-san graduated from the same high school as me and also started work at the same time. But she fell in love with a married man, and it was so painful that in the end, she jumped in front of a train. Did those feelings she had mean she was unable to move on? All I could do was keep staring at her blood-covered face. And then I realized something. She seemed to be trying to tell me something with her eyes. She no doubt wanted to convey something to me. I see, the reunion. The day before she died, I contacted her to let her know we were having a reunion. She answered sadly. I remember her saying, "I'd love to go, but..." The next moment, she disappeared from view outside the window. My body, which had felt heavy up until that point, suddenly felt lighter, and I realized we'd reached my station. The sweat on my hand holding the grip showed how afraid I'd been. Three days later, I went to visit her grave with some classmates. It was a little late, but we treated it like a reunion. We put flowers before her grave and spoke of the old times for around an hour. I prayed that she was watching us from somewhere. Then, despite the fact there was no wind up until that point, a breeze blew over us. My friends seemed creeped out, but I was fine. Because I could hear her voice on the wind. Inside my head, I responded, "Sorry we're late." Ever since then, I've visited her grave every year. It's somewhat like an event, but we all get together and make sure to visit at least once a year. Because, as the anniversary of her death approaches, she appears outside that train window, just like that summer day, asking for a reunion. Akiko watched the willow trees passing by as her father drove. She sat back, exhausted from the long trip, in the rear seat of this car she wasn't used to yet. Huh? Akiko saw a small woman standing before the willow trees. She stood right before her eyes at the same speed their car was going. Was this a bad omen of something to come? They passed the street full of willow trees, and about 30 minutes later, arrived at Akiko's grandmother's house. Akiko's family were using the summer holidays as a chance to return to their family home. It's dark, so be careful. Once they got there, they asked Akiko if she could grab a few things from the shops. Akiko gladly agreed, perhaps because she wanted some fresh air after being cooped up in the car for so long. She'd have to walk down the dark mountain road for about 30 minutes to reach the supermarket at the bottom. Plus, she'd have to use the road that was surrounded by cemeteries on both sides. Akiko started to regret matters. She was the only person using this thin, dark, creepy road. This is kind of like a test of courage. I should have asked my brother to join me. Akiko was scared, so she found it hard to keep moving forward. Huh? When she suddenly looked at the telephone pole up ahead, she saw a woman standing in the light beneath it. Her face was hidden with her back towards her, so she couldn't see her expression, but she didn't seem to be well. Are you okay?" Akiko asked. The woman turned around, and she was extremely beautiful. "No, it's nothing." There was no power in her words, and the echo of her voice was oddly sad. Something didn't feel right about the situation, but she couldn't leave her alone either. So they decided to walk the dark, thin, gravelly path together. "So, are you from Tokyo?" "Yes, we came to visit my grandmother, and they asked me to pick up a few things at the shops." "Ah, how nice of you." Thanks to that woman, Akiko was able to pass the road between the cemeteries without anything scary happening. Then, the woman suddenly stopped at the end of the gravelly road. Excuse me, I have to go pick up my child, but something came up and I can't go. I'm sorry, but could you..." "Oh, that's fine. It's Sakura Kindergarten, right?" "I'm terribly sorry. His name's Sato Takashi. Thank you so much." Once Akiko was done shopping, she rushed over to pick up the child. Everything was now fully dark, and when Akiko finally got there, it was after 7 p.m. She approached the gates and looked around. There, she saw one boy standing near the back, all by himself. "Are you Takashi-kun? Your mother asked me to pick you up. Let's go home." "Mama did? Okay." He was a cute boy around 4 years old. He quickly grew attached to Akiko and held her hand, and they sang nursery rhymes as they went back towards the gravelly road. "Ah, it's Mama! Mama!" Takashi let go of Akiko's hand and happily rushed over to his mother's arms. "I'm terribly sorry." "It's fine. Don't mention it." They walked and chatted for a short while again, before the mother suddenly stopped. "Well then, this is our stop. Thank you so much," she said, and as she turned around, the wind brushing against her beautiful face, her soft, thin hair blew up. In contrast to the right side of her face, the left side was completely messed up. Thinking she had seen something she shouldn't have, Akiko ran down the nearby bypath and then, when she reached the end, turned back around. but there was nobody there. Akiko went straight back to the house and told her grandmother everything that had just happened. According to her grandmother, 6 months earlier, some people fell in the gorge near the road full of willows. It was a family of 3, and the husband and child burnt to death. The wife barely survived, but the right side of her body was badly injured, and before long, she too passed away. Apparently, this happened because of a mistake on her husband's part. Even now, Akiko still remembers that woman sometimes. What is she up to these days? But mostly, she hopes that she finds a way to peacefully move on. I'm a normal girl attending a high school in Tokyo. But when I was in elementary school, I often saw ghosts and had strange experiences. I'd like to tell you about one of those strange experiences, something that happened to my class in the 6th grade. It was around September, and we were getting ready for our class exhibition. There were only 3 days left, so we were working hard and still at school after 6 p.m. At the time, scary stories were all the rage at school. As we were finishing up for the day, one of my friends said that we should tell some scary stories. I don't like those kinds of stories. I hated that strange atmosphere that arose when people told them. That's why I didn't join in and just watched them from the side. It was after 7 p.m. As everyone was getting into the stories, I realized a strange noise was approaching us. Is that high heels? I grew worried and checked with a nearby friend. They answered it was high heels, without hesitation. So I was right, I thought. But something was strange. Maybe it was just me, but something about that noise didn't sound right. As we made a fuss over it, that friend from before joined us. What's all this about? I was telling a story. It seems like someone's in the hall. Isn't it just a teacher? Someone said, and then opened the classroom door to look outside. There's nobody here. The hall was empty. Of course it was. If it had been a teacher, they would have come into the classroom to talk to us. And supposing it wasn't a teacher, there wasn't anyone who'd be using the hall wearing high heels. Unconcerned, my friend closed the door. But again, we heard that sound of high heels walking down the hall. Everyone in the classroom fell silent and stopped moving. Was there really nobody there? Yeah, I really didn't see anyone. Really. Then what is that sound? I think you used the phrase, at a loss for words, at a time like this. That was how much everyone's faces froze. Let's look through the bottom window. If someone's walking out there, we'll definitely be able to see their legs, one of my friends said. At that, everyone returned to their senses. Then they all gathered by the small window by the hall. That sense of normality quickly turned to fear. Something was there. A woman with no upper body, walking in high heels. We all panicked and huddled in the corner. Then we listened just to that sound of the woman walking down the hall. The footsteps wandered around the front of the classroom for a few minutes and then suddenly disappeared. It was a short while after that the colour finally returned to our faces. Everyone rushed to pack up and then fight each other to get out the door first. The next day, we remained at school after 6 p.m. again. But nothing happened. We never heard the footsteps again after that. I still think about it even now. What on earth were those legs? Why didn't she have an upper body? And where on earth did she go? The hall. You've no doubt had to go back to school to pick something up that you've forgotten after classes are done for the day. Those empty halls feel so different to normal, don't they? Most strange things that happen in the halls take place from evening to night. Like strange sounds. Or you often hear of people seeing figures as well. But most people don't understand what they're truly seeing. So, they're treated simply as fiction. I'd like to definitively answer at least one or two of those things. Oh? Who's that? It can't be a student, and the teacher on night duty is asleep. Perhaps we could uncover who is walking the halls late at night. Let's follow the footsteps to uncover a mystery. How about it? Turn right. There's nobody there. And this is the hall that led to the old school building that was torn down. Now, it's a dead end. There's no way somebody would be walking here. That's strange. We followed those footsteps, and yet now they're coming from behind us. We should go back. I don't know who it was or where they're going, but we should probably leave this mystery alone. For now, we should just get out of here and go somewhere far, far away. Last summer, I was playing Kokuri-san with friends when a girl by the name of Minako appeared. She started telling us the story of her life up until her death. My name is Minako. Please listen to the story of how I died. It all started with that terrible dream. The dream of my father when I was 4. My father died when I was little. I only vaguely remembered what he was like. I remembered him as tall for some reason. In my dream, it was the night before he died in a traffic accident. His head fell from the ceiling of the toilet. It was incredibly scary. Then, on the night of the anniversary of his death, 10 years later, that was when the tragedy began. It was a night in June, right around the time the rainy season started. That night, I went to the toilet before going to bed. As soon as I went in, I couldn't believe my eyes. Just like it happened in my dream, my mother's head fell from the ceiling. Then, after it passed by me, it disappeared in front of the toilet. Fearing for my mother, I rushed to the living room. She was dozing under the kotatsu. Seeing her there, I was relieved, thinking I'd imagined what I just saw.
Kokkuri-san, 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 Kokkuri-san.
The next day, my mother died in a traffic accident. Curious, we decided to ask her to keep going. Luckily, Minako's spirit agreed. Please, keep listening. So, then,
Kokkuri-san, Kokkuri-san.
At my mother's funeral, I started to fear that I would be the next to die. I told one of my friends in line about everything that had happened up until that point. But my friend didn't really believe me. Of course not. Nobody would believe a fabrication like that. But as it all became too much to bear, someone called out to me. A boy around the same age as me, by the name of Sato-kun. When he finished listening to my story, he said he was concerned about the strong, unnatural energy he could feel in the area. I couldn't help but associate those words with the heads I saw over and over in the toilet. At that, I was convinced that I would be next. I asked Sato-kun how I could protect myself. He considered it for a moment. I asked him if it was possible to speak with the spirit that was bringing me such bad luck. Then Sato-kun told me about a method of inviting a spirit in from the Edo period that was known as Hyaku Monogatari. This game involved gathering 100 people and lighting candles. Each person then told one scary story each, and after the story, they blew out a candle. Sato-kun said he'd invite people from school so we could carry it out. I remember feeling somewhat better after that. Thanks, Sato-kun. There's no need for thanks. I can't just let you die. That's all there is to it. I'll definitely gather 100 people. Don't worry. See you later, Sato-kun said as he left. I didn't understand what he meant, but something didn't feel right. The next night, the phone rang in an empty room. It was from Sato-kun. He said he'd gathered 100 people for the game, and we were all to meet at the cemetery the following night at 8 p.m. I'll see you tomorrow then. Yeah, thanks, Sato-kun. With his help, I started to feel a little bit of hope. Thank goodness. My heart was clouded after my mother's death, and at that moment it was like the strain there was gone. I felt somewhat uplifted. That night, I went to the toilet without hesitation. I forgot that I was usually too scared to go. I turned the lights on as I hummed and pushed the door open. Looking at the ceiling, I was shocked. My face was floating there. It was just my head. It passed by my eyes just like that time with my mother and then disappeared in front of the toilet. I was so scared that I screamed. Next thing I knew, a chill throughout my entire body caused me to tremble. Then my hope turned to despair. I won't go out without a fight.
Kokkuri-san, 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 Kokkuri-san.
Honestly, it was a creepy story. Seeing the severed heads of both herself and her family members, the one thing she didn't want to see. I didn't even want to think about it. It must have been terrifying. But please put yourself in our place and imagine listening to this type of story from Kokkuri-san for such a long time. It was many times scarier than listening to a story the regular way. I wanted to stop, but Minako-san wouldn't let us. The next night.
Kokkuri-san, Kokkuri-san.
The next night, 100 people gathered at the cemetery, and in that noisy atmosphere, we began. Well then, I'll start. Long ago, there was a landowner who was cruel to his farmers. His son grew fed up with his cruel behavior and one day he killed him. He also tried to die, but the farmers wouldn't let him. Then he led a happy life. The end. Sato-kun blew out the first candle. His story wasn't that scary. But we didn't have time to complain about the stories. It was almost like we were at a party, so everyone continued telling stories. And it was my turn last. If I wasn't last, then there would be no point to this game. I couldn't stop thinking about what happened in the toilet the night before, and so I didn't hear most of the other people's stories. So much was running around in my head that I lost track of time. I just had to get rid of that bad feeling I had. What's wrong? Are you scared? We're all having fun. Sato-kun was enjoying the stories. Sato-kun, last night As I went to tell Sato-kun about the night before, a very simple question suddenly came to mind. I didn't know anyone named Sato-kun. I forced myself to remain calm and think straight. What class was this guy from? Did I have a friend named Sato-kun? Why was he at my mother's funeral? Minako, it's your turn. Eh? Already? Hurry up, I'm tired. As I was thinking, my turn arrived. It was after 2 a.m. I forgot about Sato-kun for a moment and decided to tell the final Hyakumonogatari story. When I was 4, I went to the toilet alone late one night and saw my father's head fall from the ceiling. The next day, he died. Just recently, my mother died in the same way. And last night, I saw my own head fall. I was so afraid that I rushed through the story, leaving parts out. And then, when I was pretty much done with the story, suddenly, the last candle went out. At first, I thought it was because of the wind, but I was wrong. Someone next to me blew it out. I looked around. I was surrounded by darkness and couldn't sense anyone nearby. More and more I came to realize this wasn't normal, and fear gripped me. Hey, guys!
Minako.
Who's that? Are you my ancestor? Guys! Where did you all go?
みなこ。みんなはもう帰ったよ。みなこ。おいで。
Dad? No! Don't kill me!
これは償いだから。一生幸せに生きてしまった僕の。
You're Sato-kun. Hey, Sato-kun, you're...
みなこ、お母さん再婚しなくてよかったでしょ。
I can't breathe.
みなこ、もうすぐだから。
Don't kill me. Please. I don't know whether Minako-san actually died like that, but when I think it might be true, I get chills. Ever since then, I've made sure not to look at the ceiling when I go to the toilet. I might be thinking a little too much about it, but it feels like I might see my own head fall. Even now, I regret hearing this story, like it was something I should never have heard.